Hello, my name is Dave Dykstra. This documentary was prepared for the eTech 540 course in the MET program at UBC. I'll be describing the impact of the telephone on society. The telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell and patented by him in 1876. Bell was very involved teaching deaf people to speak, but he was also resolved to replicate human speech through mechanical vibrations. Bell was not the only inventor pursuing the telephone. His patent was filed mere hours before a caveat by Elisha Gray was filed declaring the intent to invent the telephone. There are many others who also contributed, but it was Bell whose patent was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1888 by a 4-3 vote. It was this slimmest of margins that allowed Bell's company to maintain a monopoly on the lucrative industry. Shortly after patenting, Bell offered to sell it to William Orton, president of Western Union, for $100,000, but had his toy laughed at. Only 2 years later, the telephone was already worth $25 million and it continued to skyrocket. When the patent expired in 1893, many smaller companies started up, but most could not compete or were bought up by the big companies. The first phone networks were closed systems between specific units, purchased as a subscription by an individual or company. An example might be a phone line between a shop and home, between neighboring farms, or between several branches of a bank, or even between a rural outpost and a town. While the use of the telephone spread quickly, it was not till much later that phones were used for long-distance calls. This was due to several reasons. The vast infrastructure needed to be put in place, and there was not a great perceived need. Most calls were simply convenient interactions between local individuals. In principle, the phone is relatively simple. It contains a magnet and a diaphragm, a thin metal plate. The diaphragm vibrates due to sound waves in the same way our eardrums work. This vibration causes breaks in a magnetic field that surrounds the diaphragm, which in turn causes a current to flow through a wire coil around the magnet. The current passes along the wire to the phone on the other end, where the process is reversed, converting the current back into the sound waves. The telephone remediated and replaced the telegraph for rapid long-distance communication, and its usage and abilities continue to expand today. The development of smartphones has truly opened the door for access to information, communication, and organization all in one small device. The telegraph was effective in rapidly and accurately sharing information across large distances, but lacked personal connection. Messages required experienced operators with a good knowledge of Morse code to translate, and the messages had to be very terse. The telegraph companies built a network of wires across the country, and it was this aspect that made them successful. The telephone filled a different niche originally. It was about staying in touch conveniently with those you knew nearby. Farmers would order supplies, bankers would touch base between branches. Users would need to buy or lease individual phone units, which would then be installed along with wiring by the phone company. In rural areas, to keep in touch with their neighbors, farmers would often use barbed wire fences as the phone line to save costs, which also meant they shared a common party line. Party lines meant anybody could pick up and listen to any conversation, so rules of phone etiquette were also developed. Both the telegraph and postal system were labor-intensive and economically expensive, while phones were automated and do-it-yourself. So eventually phones replaced the telegraph for long-distance communication as well. Since both the telegraph and telephone use current electricity to carry the message, telegraph lines could be used for phone calls as well. This meant that the existing infrastructure could simply be repurposed. Soon every town set up a centralized switchboard and hundreds of users could interact with each other with neighboring towns or long distance. Since anyone could simply speak into the phone, the need for operator or Morse code was gone. Anyone with a phone could access anyone else, so switchboard operators were needed to connect the correct lines together. Dorothy Johnson, an operator in Whitefish, Montana in 1919, described her experience. The board was a vast expanse of eyes with at the base a dozen or so pairs of plugs and cords for connecting and an equal number of keys for talking, listening, and ringing. On a busy day, these cords were woven across the board in a constantly changing, confusing pattern. The invention of the telephone had a profound impact on modern communication. TV, radio, and the phone reintroduced the person and context into the conversation, while on the other hand, the telephone was seen as a threat to privacy, and it was thought likely to destroy the art of letter writing. Typically, non-oral communication was formal, rigid, from one person to another, a passing of information or ideas. While the orderliness, machine-like quality, and legibility of print allowed rapid silent reading, it served to separate the text from the author and context, and so isolate and create privacy. The telephone was initially used in this manner as well, to place an order, set up a meeting, for emergency response, or similar brief factual information. As such, much of a call was one directional from caller to audience for a specific purpose, and so was usually local in nature. As people became more comfortable with phones and had access to more people, not only did the demand for phone lines increase, but the approach changed as well. Communication became bidirectional, between two people. This second orality, from Ong 1982, meant that business owners could not only connect with their customers, clarify orders, or inform about products and sales. Individuals could not only talk about their lives and update family and friends, but they could also hear from them at the same time and interact with the information. As Ong writes, spoken utterance is addressed by a real living person to another real living person or real living persons at a specific time in a real setting, which includes always much more than mere words. If writing allowed distance and objectivity, then it was the invention of the phone that brought back the sense of closeness and community. Perhaps the greatest influence of the telephone is its convenience. People suddenly had quick and private access to others, even in inaccessible places such as foreign countries, at a time of their choice. Businesses quickly found the phone to be more convenient and economical, even preferred over face-to-face meetings, as no social niceties or travel were required. While text has advantages for itemizing and tracking information quickly, phone calls were generally more efficient, as once a speaker senses understanding, he can exploit this very freely. Pierce, 1977. The pendulum appears to have swung back, however, as today texting is more efficient, and it requires even less social niceties and maintains the advantages of text. The telephone was received warmly, not only by the general population, but also by educators. The ability for instantaneous communication over long distances brought new relevance to the news and enabled new sources of information. Already in 1876, Herbert P. Rolfe, superintendent of schools in Montana, started a telephone club of schoolboys and even held a phone concert from two separate locations. Postman speaks eloquently about the impact technology has not only on society, but on ourselves, the very way we think. He wrote in 1992 that technology commandeers and redefines our terminology. An example of this is the word hello. As described by O'Donnell and Engel, hello was invented by Thomas Edison in 1877 and was well received as a neutral, universal greeting on the telephone, over against Bell's preference of ahoy. For centuries, knowledge and learning have been dominated by text. Print can reproduce with complete accuracy, can persist for long periods of time, and can be consumed at the leisure of the reader. It removes the need for spatial or temporal context and so serves to isolate individuals. Orality, however, relies more on the interplay between the speaker and audience, and so makes greater use of the common vernacular. The telephone and other immersive technologies like radio and TV were instrumental in a shift away from text, introducing the age of the second orality. Language is a democratic construct. Each generation has its slang, and since the coming of the internet and texting, shorter words have a higher premium, and communication has shifted away from orality again. Perhaps with more voice communication and voice-to-text software, the pendulum will swing again. Postman argues that perhaps the biggest changes are underneath, altering the users themselves. New technologies alter the structure of our interests, the things we think about. They alter the character of our symbols, the things we think with. And they alter the nature of community, the arena in which thoughts developed. Postman, 1992. The phone is an example of a tool for immersive communication, the natural, real-time exchange of people that makes them forget their geographical separation. Some forms of mass communication, such as radio and television, are also immersive, but they have different social effects than the phone. They tend to distract, isolate, and separate people, while phones share information, drawing people together. According to Pierce, 1977, while mass communication fits people to schedules, phones fit people, even increasing spontaneity and aiding in setting up other social interactions, further connecting people. Pierce also discusses other benefits of the phone, making reservations, a source of information, security, such as emergency services and help desks, and access to any needed service or product. The yellow pages are the new Sears Roebuck catalog, he writes. Despite all these great benefits, people are still social animals and will travel even great distances to meet face-to-face whenever possible. This, Chu argues, is because humans convey and derive meaning from physical proximity, posture, gaze, and gesture. Immersive technologies, therefore, seek to bring people together into community. As such, Chu further argues that the apex and ultimate goal for immersive technology is teleportation, truly bringing people together. As the telephone replaced the telegraph, smartphones replaced landlines, so teleportation, if it were to become reality, would also remediate the telephone. Thank you for watching.